Okay, everybody, well, welcome to today's webinar, Scaling Material Reuse with the US Materials Marketplace. This is Amy O'Mara, the Director of the Corporate Eco Forum, and I'm really excited about today's webinar as I've personally been privileged to be a part of this project since its very beginnings. So in a moment, I'll introduce you to our partners on the project, but first I just wanted to share a little bit of the backstory. So it goes back to a mid-year meeting that the Corporate Eco Forum held at the Nike headquarters almost 2 years ago in March of 2014, which was focused entirely on the circular economy. And while we were there, our members were grappling with all these challenges around waste and materials management and what was then a fairly new idea for a lot of companies, the circular economy. And at that meeting, the suggestion was made that CEF should create kind of a matchmaking service that would allow members to map and share their material streams as well as their input needs and take advantage of our trusted network of members to help close some of those material loops in ways that could be both efficient and cost-effective. And we thought that was a really promising idea and began exploring how we might test it or put it into motion. And it was really important to us at the beginning to not reinvent any wheels. So we consulted with members to find out if anything like this already existed. And it was actually General Motors, who we're going to hear from a little later in today's call, who first tipped me off to the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development as a possible place to start. They let me know that US BCSD had been working on these kinds of solutions for a long time under names like byproduct synergy or industrial reuse. And at the time that I reached out to them, they were beginning to test a new online marketplace called the Materials Marketplace in a regional market of Austin. So at that time, around that time, Andy Mangan from the US BCSD and I started talking together about the possibility of a national level marketplace for CEF members that would allow multiple facilities across the US to map their material streams, seek out new partners, and begin making some exchanges. And we began working with a core group of Corporate Eco Forum members, which included General Motors and Nike, and then eventually reached out to partners at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development as well, who have a core function, as many of you know. Many of our CEF members are also members of WBCSD, focused on sustainable materials. So working all together, our three organizations and our corporate champions designed a pilot project that we launched last summer, which we called the United States Materials Marketplace. And I'm sure that many of you have heard bits and pieces of it over the past year, and a lot of you on today's call are actually already involved in various capacities, but many of you are hearing about it for the first time. So what we're hoping today is that today's webinar will provide a good, robust overview of the project, an update of what we've learned from the pilot phase, where we're headed with the continuation and growth of the project, and really enough information to help your company decide whether the marketplace is a good fit to help you with your own waste and circularity objectives. So Devin, if you can move to the next slide. What I also wanted to mention, as someone who's been working for quite a long time in lots of different partnerships and collaborations, I want to express that this project is really a prime example of what's possible when organizations with common objectives and really complementary strengths put their organizational egos aside and really set to work together to solve a problem. Working with the US Business Council and the World Business Council on this project has been such a pleasure, and I'm really excited to introduce our project partners who are here today to help describe the platform. First, I'd like to introduce Andy Mangan, the Executive Director of the US BCSD, who really, better than anyone else I know, can describe why this particular time, this particular moment in time is so ripe for a project like this to work. He'll then pass it to Andrea Brown, the Director of Safe and Sustainable Materials for the WBCSD. She'll talk a little bit more about the particular reasons that WBCSD got involved and the special role that they'll be playing in its expansion. And then Andy's going to take it back and take us through the details of the project, along with John Bradburn from General Motors, who can share a company perspective and more about the value that GM has derived from this platform. We hope to have a little bit of time at the end to take some questions, so if you have them, please feel free to tee them up at any time. You can use the chat function or the question function on the right-hand side of your WebEx screen to submit a question to me. and I will tee those up at the end. And lastly, I just want to say that we are recording this session so that it will be available after the fact. We're excited to be opening this webinar to companies from across our 3 organizational memberships, and we encourage you to share it more broadly once this webinar has passed. So thank you all again for being here today, and now I would like to hand it over to Andy Mangan with the U.S. Business Council.
Well, thank you very much, Amy. Great introduction, and welcome everyone. It's good to be here with you today. I have been involved in this material reuse or circular economy effort for the past 20 years, and it's terrific to see the kind of growth and engagement that's happening this year, last year, and the last couple of years. That's a couple of the things that I think are making the scale up here in the U.S. and elsewhere a real possibility. First of all, we have, with those through the 3 organizations that Amy just introduced, hundreds of companies that are hearing about this and that are in trusted relationships with those organizations and are looking for ways to engage both internally but also increasingly across industries on different opportunities to achieve the various sustainability objectives, whether it's carbon related or water or materials or energy, other. And this material flow circular economy approach really allows us to hit all those. This platform that we've built also relies on a sophisticated software capability that is getting more and more sophisticated every day, and that's another key element of why we're able to do this now. 5 years ago, we built our first software platform, and what we have today is light years ahead, of course, as you all know, and we're building another generation this year. So it's as we grow and learn and progress from the participants, we're adding and changing the whole effort, but it's very much an inclusive program, and both here in the U.S., where we had 23 companies participating this summer in our pilot, which you'll hear about here shortly, and our goal this year is to get that up to over 100 companies here in the U.S. We also are working in other parts of the world where there's interest in this approach. It's very much a way egalitarian in certain respects to allow interaction between different countries on these same issues and opportunities that work in the U.S. could work in Europe or in Asia or elsewhere, and how do we knit all that together? All that is going to be, has part of this approach. That concept that we're here talking to you about today, the materials marketplace, was recognized in this way last month when, surprising to us, we won World Economic Forum's Digital Disruptor Circulars Award, which was terrific. So being there in Davos to get that, and then also hearing the kind of support that was there, and just the recognition for it all, was a great kind of affirmation of where we think this is headed and where the opportunities are. And more on that here in a little bit, but let me stop now and introduce my colleague from the WBCSD, Andrea Brown. Okay, Andrea?
Hi, Andy. Thank you, Amy and Andy. Sorry, I'm going to have to be very brief because I'm just boarding an airplane, but I want to thank Corporate Ecoforum for hosting this webinar today and for everybody joining. I think only really to echo what Amy already said, I think we're, as WBCSD, extremely pleased to be able to join with the Corporate Ecoforum and the US BCSD in this area. It's very much aligned with our objectives around helping companies in this long-term transition towards a circular economy. And, we're very much working across value chains around solution areas that can't be done by, one company alone. And this is really a perfect example of where that collaboration and the partnerships that our 3 organizations bring. And so we're really pleased to be part of the U.S. marketplace, and also pleased to be thinking through and engaging with companies such as yourselves in how we also think about markets beyond the U.S. and how can we take that learning forward into other areas as well. So I'm going to unfortunately have to leave, but I just want to thank for the opportunity really to just give a short intro and reasoning why we're really pleased to be part of this project. Thanks, Amy and Andy.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And if anybody wants to learn more about the European expansion plans and things like that, if we're not able to answer the questions that come up, we're certainly happy to put you in touch to learn more information about that after the fact. But thanks for sharing a few minutes with us, Andrea. And now I'll hand it back to Andy to take us through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, Andrea. And so I'm just going to give you a quick background on the pilot that we've mentioned that we started last summer. So as Amy described it, we came up with this idea. We came up with it after having spent the last 20 years, since the mid-90s, working on this material reuse concept more at the local level, say municipal or regional, for several reasons. It's you can get people. We got people together face to face. We also had logistics issues which were localized, and we had the commitment of the companies in that particular city. So we worked on this successfully in a dozen cities around North America, Chicago, Kansas City, Seattle, Mobile, Alabama, and that's continuing. In fact, right now we have a robust project in Austin, Texas, where we're headquartered, where the city of Austin has a zero waste commitment, and they actually were the first to deploy the marketplace software here at the municipal level, actually county level, and any company in the region that has operations here can participate. So we have over 150 companies involved and a lot of different materials and flowing this way and that. It's very much, there are large companies. There are also a lot of small and mid-sized companies and local government entities involved when you work at the local level. The idea of going to the national level really came as we worked on those projects. Many of the companies we engaged with that were larger and had operations around the U.S. asked if we could go national. We never had that kind of capability until we were working on a project in northern China starting in 2013, and we built this second generation software that is the materials marketplace platform we're using now. And while we didn't deploy it in China, the timing was not quite right. That's when we started talking to Amy, and we decided to go in and deploy it here in the U.S. nationally. And we wanted to get 20 companies to participate as kind of the testers, and we were oversubscribed and had to stop at about 23 companies. Good mix of companies. You'll see them here in a second, but the idea is let's give it a try, see how it works at the national level in a scale up, we've never done that. So here is a quick summary of the results of this summer project, which started June 1st and ended at the end of August. So of those 23 companies, we first had to get them all focused on the software, comfortable with using it, and then get the data that they wanted to upload. The first function of the software allows the company participants to upload the information about the materials that they'd like to have involved in potentially trading and or materials they'd like to access and get access to from others. And so we had 78 locations from these companies participating. About almost 2.5 million tons of materials were uploaded. Also 59 different materials were being sought by different companies, and of those, the second big thing that we do with this program is our technical team, which we built up over those past couple decades, and the knowledge base we have. We help identify, analyze the materials and identify potential collaborations or business opportunities for reuse. And we came up with, in the summer, 68 different possibilities, recommendations that we sent back to the participating companies. And of those, by the time the project came to an end, that phase of it, we had 19 transactions that were in the works. So that was when, and this is just a slide that gives you a breakdown of the different types of materials. You can see the biggest section there is packaging, and you can imagine that breaks down into the various types of packaging. But there's a broad range of different materials you can see here, and this is representative of those, just those 23 companies. If we've got 100 companies, it would be a different mix, of course, but the real story on this slide is that every material is open. It's open whether some of these companies had large amounts of furniture that they put in here. Others had water-related materials, so it's a mix, and the door is open to all of that. Interesting in terms of the types of transactions that were in development at that time and have continued. You can see some of them here. A lot of the industrial materials are different flows from chemicals, metals. Also, there's construction materials, and down below, which are in smaller type, are a list of the other recommendations that we had sent out, but we really didn't have time to follow up. That was one of the conclusions when we stopped at the end of August and took a step back to evaluate how this pilot had gone. One of the conclusions was, well, we just didn't. A 3-month pilot is nowhere near enough. We need to keep this going. That's what we heard from virtually every one of the companies that participated. The other key result that we heard was we want more companies to participate. So let's get this up more. Let's get dozens of companies, and the more there is, the more opportunities there will be, and the more options and creative solutions we'll be able to track. The project itself is based on it's a cloud-based system. It'll, as I said, you can upload fairly easily materials in bulk or individually, and we're in the next generation of the software, which we're working on now. There will be a plug and play option where you could plug into your system and only the materials that you want to flow in here, only information you want to flow would flow right into the marketplace without having to have it manually uploaded. So that's an example of another kind of enhancement that we're working on and going ahead based on this pilot. The other thing is the analysis that I described and the recommendations. We also have a higher level of recommendation, which is an endorsement where we see direct line of sight to an opportunity that we really feel is there and we should be acted on. So that's kind of our function. We have a broad range of capabilities in terms of technical from different various industries and or material reuse options. We recognize that the company's operators will always know more than we'll ever know, so we're in more of a role of like a coach and or guide in this, but we also will be there to make sure that the conversation continues and doesn't get left on the table. So we're kind of expediters, we call it. So that's you'll have a partner there to help work through some of those details. The other thing that's there is in the software is a transaction capability, so you can run the transaction through it, and it's got in there listed the range of challenges or obstacles or things you need to think about to make sure there isn't a blind spot as you're going down this road. We've encountered those over the years, and the software pushes those in front of you as you go down a transaction. You can also have the option at this stage of going offline and doing this one-on-one, but in the future we're going to try to consolidate and have all the transactions run through the marketplace. That'll enable us to keep track of everything, report on all the results, both, well, financial, environmental, and societal benefits. And that's where we're headed. The last part is this collaboration aspect, where at the first level of this, it's I've got materials that I'd like to have someone else make use of, 5,000 tons of wood products that are off spec, for example, or a company might have a commitment to the most efficient buildings in the future, LEED and beyond, and would be interested in that kind of material. So that kind of thing that's an example of a transaction that's kind of in progress. The other aspect as you get into this is groups of companies that are committed to, for example, plastic reuse or circular plastic models of supply chain, where you create new approaches to not only keep the plastic flows out of landfills or out of ships going to Asia and have them be reused here in the U.S. in different ways. We can use the marketplace as a way to convene and work through some of those opportunities or challenges together and bring in other companies that may not be there that we feel should be there. We can use the marketplace as a way to kind of a proving ground or an experiment zone to test different approaches. And what works, great. What doesn't work, we can adjust and then keep moving forward. Another example of that might be on carbon. You know, we have in material reuse, you save tremendous amounts of energy. You don't have to. Just one example is metal. If you reuse a pound of steel instead of creating it new, there's a huge carbon reduction opportunity there, but that currently is not recognized in the overall COP 21 Paris Agreement. However, that commitment to go for 2 degrees that was made in Paris is going to require these kinds of creative solutions to get on the table. So we can bring together groups of companies that can not only recognize that, but also calculate the kind of carbon reductions they're seeing through material reuse, and we can create and establish the metrics that are needed, the verification and auditing capabilities that would be required. And we have that in the works now also. It's another example of something that's happening. The US EPA is very interested in that. This Obama administration's Clean Power Plan, which is out there now requiring states to report their strategies for reducing carbon. We're talking to a number of states about including material reuse as a component of their carbon reduction strategy, and EPA, the waste side, is very interested in there now, talking to the air side. So that kind of collaboration structure, you can use this marketplace to help organize and move down that path. Just a quick show of the companies that participated. Some of the companies are not here because they didn't want to have they wanted to be, excuse me, pardon me, under the radar, I guess. They didn't want to be public, but there's a good group. It was an excellent group of companies. We have others now that we've been talking to about joining and getting involved. I will also say, I think now is the time, and here's some of the collaborators we have. We have several great universities that are, Yale University is a leader in industrial ecology and has been for the last 25 years. And we're very familiar and work with them closely over the last couple decades. Ohio State University, their chemical and biomolecular engineering side is a partner, and we've worked with them for many years. At Texas A&M School of Architecture, there is a growing movement, small now, nascent in the architectural world, focused on reusing materials in buildings, and that is something that is a focus at A&M. So it's again a kind of each of these are both all able to bring in PhD postdoc and master's students along with professors to help us with this, and be kind of test zones. So for the architecture school, for example, materials are flowing from our marketplace for use by these architectural professors and students in new building construction. So, and they can also do the kind of the UL or other tests that are needed to determine whether these could meet the requirements. We also have, I mentioned several other city-level projects where we're still working on those. Austin, Memphis, Tennessee is committed to working on that. They want to, and then Minneapolis area wants to do the marketplace with a group of companies up there, and then in San Diego, there's another group of companies. So we're continuing to work at the city level as well as this national level project. And just a real quick point about how do you connect. You might be wondering, how do you connect the cities with the national and actually international, though I'll tell you about that in a second. But we're crafting, putting together a cooperative model where it's like a co-op where the cities could join the co-op just as the national would be a part of the co-op, and they would commit to share the results at their level, whatever it is, with everybody else, and in return get access to the results from the others in the cooperative. And in that way, we can work in other parts of the world, whether that's Asia or Europe or Australia or elsewhere, and we can use that as a kind of a unifying structure to allow for this kind of knowledge to flow, but also retain ownership of it, whether it's at local, national level. We also, for the first time, have a state that wants to deploy the marketplace. It's the state of Ohio has committed to deploy this at the state level. So there's a lot of interesting pathways, roads to go down, but it all kind of can come together and be used in a shared way. I will say, I've described this carbon strategy. I mean, I'll just say in this slide, the US EPA estimates material production and use adds up to 42% of system-wide greenhouse gas emissions in the US. So there's a significant number that we can attach to what we're talking about here. And if we can get credit for the carbon, then we'll, I mean, General Motors, for example, a couple years ago estimated 10 million tons a year of carbon reduction through material reuse of the type we're talking about. That's a nice opportunity we're aiming for. We, just as an aside, well, let me just see the next, we're almost at the end of these slides. I want to say that wherever your company might be on the sustainability arc, this system can support, should be able to support it. If you get involved and you're early in the game, you'll get a lot of feedback and direct connection to other companies that are moving in this direction. Why are they doing it? What are the values they're getting out of it? What's the future look like for them and for you too? And or business deals will emerge from this. So there'll be new business relationships and actual commerce will take place. So that's a very good aspect of this. But whether it's water compliance, as you can see here, all of those elements we'll be able to address. Just to say, stop and give you a word about expansion and scale up. We've this past month reached an agreement with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development to deploy a national marketplace for the first time outside of the U.S. in Turkey this time to begin with, which is this European Bank was set up in 1989-90 to support integration of the former Soviet Union countries into Europe, and they have a commitment to sustainability as well in their mission, and so they're supporting this as a growth business development opportunity in Turkey, and see that potentially in other countries where they have their banking operations. So we'll be, as part of that project in Turkey, we'll also be upgrading the software, and we'll be going further down this pathway of figuring out how all this can work together and connect. It's still, there is an experimental aspect to it, but the real results from this summer project, a pilot, were people liked the software, it worked, they were able to use it successfully, and they wanted to do more. So that's why we're moving ahead in the U.S. We feel really confident about growing in Europe, and it's starting in Turkey. We're working with the World Business Council. It's just something Andrea would have talked about, I think, had she been able to stay on. There is a European Commission commitment that's been made of 650 million euros to support circular economy activity and growth in Europe. And the Commission has reached out to the WBCSD and encouraged them to submit a proposal that would include expansion of the marketplace in Europe as a part of that, they call it a Horizon 2020 program that would use those funds to establish circular economy activities in Europe. So that would start in 2017. So this year we'll be working in Turkey, and it should lead to opportunities in Europe in 2017 if we're successful with that effort. We're also, I mentioned China. We work very closely with the Chinese Business Council and the U.S. and Chinese governments at a fairly high level. The U.S. State Department and Department of Energy are partnered with their counterparts in China, the NDRC, National Development and Reform Commission, and Ministry of Industry and Information Technology in China to support circular economy growth in China. They actually passed a circular economy law at the national level in China in 2009, so they understand the value that this could bring to the Chinese industrial and manufacturing sectors, and we see potential for going back in that direction. So those are just a few. There are others that are out there, other opportunities for growth, but I'll end just by saying we see this as a real scale-up opportunity that could provide great kind of capacity for all companies that are participating, and also shared knowledge, collaboration opportunities, policy directives that could come out of this, and new technologies, new business opportunities. So we really would love to engage with you and have you be part of it going forward this year and into the future. So with that, Amy, I can turn it back to you and let you kind of field some questions, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. And actually, before we do that, I would love to give our guest, John Bradburn from General Motors. First of all, thank you, Andy. That was a very comprehensive overview. There's so much going on with this project, really so much potential, so many different angles to cover. I just want to echo all the excitement that you shared and encourage everyone to think about getting involved. But before we do take questions from the audience, I wanted to give John Bradburn from General Motors a chance to speak for a couple minutes about their experience with this field of industrial reuse and byproduct synergy, but particularly the value they see in this marketplace. And so, John, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about the company's perspective.
Okay. Sure, Amy. Thank you very much, and good job, Andy. Hi, everybody. This is John Bradford GM. I manage GM's waste globally, and maybe I could give a few examples of the program and how it's helped us. And but to frame it up even more, we've got 131 operations around the world that are landfill free. Our recycle rates are quite high. And our movement is to find more reuse, more opportunities to either reduce or to reuse. And this reuse opportunity here is really good because it takes it to the next level. I think most of you know that a lot of the recycling work traditionally has been through relationships, through traditional type applications, whereas in this case, it allows for out-of-the-box, innovative type applications, matching up physical properties, chemical properties, working within the new beneficial reuse rules and understanding, what can we do with something. This software allows an entity to expand their vision. I always say that, people have vision. They have the ability to see, but do they really see? That is the possibilities. As an example, we deal in about a little over 2 million tons of material a year that we recycle and reuse. But a significant portion of that is metal. Now, within that metal category, we have cutouts for our doors and our stamping operations. Those are basically virgin stock from sheet stock, and we call it offal. So it hasn't been stretched or formed. It's perfectly suitable and available for making things, for restamp. And we've reached out within this forum, and Andy alluded to some of the architectural applications for that sort of thing. Very high volume, and the idea here is to be able to market it and sell it at a higher rate than we would have gotten for it in the scrap market, and bringing up that financial aspect and sustainability. Another example, we have a engine installation that is over the top of the engine in covering a part that we call a beauty cover. The installation is a PET type material. And when we were doing this project in Detroit, we found an entity who was interested in our idea. And our idea was to take it outside the automotive industry and even take it outside the manufacturing industry and use it as a home insulation. Now, we want to take some of our scrap that's generated and take it, and we've sent some to Detroit, and we've had it tested for the building codes, and it's passed, and we're going to use it in challenged neighborhoods to help people who struggle to pay their heat bills. So that's the social aspects. It's also waste reduction. It's also reuse versus recycle. The material itself was generated in a landfill-free plant, and they were sending it to an energy application, which is okay, but a reuse is even better, and that's another example. We're setting up a long supply chain, or actually we call it a supply web of other PET applications, water bottles and such, to target end-use outlets for water bottles we generate in our plants, as well as some of other stakeholders, and to specifically create vehicle parts, architectural building-related filtration materials, and other applications. So that one is a web in that it can grow. It can have many tentacles, in a program like the Materials Marketplace can help it succeed much, much quicker. I've been at this a long time, and a lot of it has been based on experience, but a lot of companies don't have people that, have been at it a long time that, know some of these outlets, and this enables some intelligent and some innovative reuse applications very quickly for all companies. So I really encourage everybody to consider it, and it also enables the members through the EcoForum World Business Council, U.S. Business Council, to talk these things back and forth and find some solutions so that we can take our vision that we have and actually see and follow up and make these possibilities happen.
Thank you so much, John, for sharing, and thank you just for your leadership, not only in this particular marketplace, but just in this field. It's been great to work with you, and we definitely feel lucky to be able to tap your enormous expertise as we continue to build and expand this project. So thank you for joining us today. And if there are any questions for John, please just chat them through, and we'll pose them up. I am going to open up with some questions now that have been coming in. The first one is about the brokering role that the US BCSD plays, this sort of behind-the-scenes role. And I'm glad this question was asked because I think it's one of the most compelling parts of this project is the vast expertise behind the scenes and sort of what we've learned through the pilot about how very important a high level of handholding is to the success. The particular question was about the volume of work that would entail to carry through on the connections that are identified, and how we're going to meet that challenge. So I don't know, Andy, do you want to comment on that a little bit more about some of our partners that we're working with and how we plan to keep up with the great volume of work that's coming in terms of brokering connections?
Sure, Amy. So there is a core team of specialists that we have at the Business Council that will oversee and monitor that with the systems that will keep track of engagement on the different recommendations and or those who are not responding, following through on those. So there's that kind of a thing that is, so there's a human element there that is a big difference from these kinds of, in the past, many you might call waste exchanges have been tried, but one of the real keys for us that we bring in that we think is critical for success is having that oversight and the ability to keep pushing down the path. So we have staff that do that. Then beyond that, they also hold technical capabilities, but we have over the years identified and brought together a broad range of technical experts with capabilities that we've not only shown as proven, but also grown in sophistication over the years. So we have, not just in the U.S., but in Asia and in Europe, those same relationships. We're tapping into and have hired folks from those universities that I put up that have worked with us over the years, and so there's also a growing flow of people who are coming our way that are interested in this. And the other thing we're going to be doing is trying to digitize as much of this as we can forward. So as you scale, say we have thousands of companies and materials, you need to have that in an automated system. So we're moving in that direction with this next generation software we'll be working on this year, and have a core team of senior software engineers and architects that are working with us to help make that happen. And so the goal is to scale, commit with the human resources that we recognize and have understood over the years are needed, and then also move toward automation and creating an intelligence in this system that will allow for it to be able to operate on its own and grow in sophistication and knowledge, be like a learning machine going forward. So those are the kind of strategies that we have and assets we have in place.
Andy, it might also be a good time to mention that, during the pilot phase, one of the things that was really important to us was making a zero barrier to entry. We really wanted to have companies have zero risk going into this project so that we could bring companies on board and test the idea and find out if it had legs. But as has been rightfully pointed out, this is a labor-intensive and technology-intensive platform that does have very real costs associated with it. And so moving forward, we had to think critically about how we were going to support the further development and expansion of the project financially. And of course, all of our organizations are helping to support that, the future of the project. But we have also introduced a tiered structure for participating companies to help financially support the project as well. Andy, could you talk for just a couple of minutes about that, and then we can move on to some of the other questions that have come in?
Yeah, okay, Amy. Yeah, the pilot, since it was a pilot and a pure test to see if this would work, we shouldered the cost of that among the three organizations. So there was no charge to the participating companies. Going forward, we that was one of the reasons it was only 3 months. We couldn't keep going much longer. So there is a cost. We're still building, exploring different business models and how to make this sustainable going forward as it grows. And in the near term, we've set up a tiered kind of a contribution from the participants that goes from the low end of like $3,500 to participate up to the sponsorship level of $10,000 per year. So if we get, say we're moving down that path and get 50 or 60 or 100 companies, that will generate a good economic revenue stream that will allow us to help achieve some of the growth that we need. And so that's one aspect. We see this as a transitional model, maybe a year, 2 or 3, and then we're moving towards scale. When we get enough participation, there'll be a transaction fee, likelihood of a transaction fee structure that will be seamless in the software. That's one thing we're focused on right now that could be the way we go, which would be reliant on enough of participation to allow us to be able to wait for those kinds of revenues to flow in. So that's another. The other thing that's happening is, as I mentioned, the European bank is shouldering the full load, the full cost of the project in Europe, or in Turkey rather, and with the goal of transitioning to a transaction model after a couple of years. So that's another way we're seeing growth. That's the same in Ohio. The state of Ohio wants to pay the full cost to deploy the marketplace there. So that's a different structure and funding model. But the overall goal is, I think, when you get to the point where you have enough participation, can generate the kinds of revenue flows from transactions, that's where we're hoping to head with that. But for the near term, yeah, there is a tiered kind of a contribution that we'll be seeking from the participants going forward.
Thanks, Andy. So one of the questions came in, and I think a question like this has come up in every presentation we've ever done together on this, and it's about toxicity of materials coming through the marketplace. The way the question is phrased is, how do we make sure that we have pure and non-toxic materials? For some materials, it's hard to track where they come from and have been to, and to know their grade of purity. So can you talk a little bit about how the platform allows posters to share the material makeup, sort of how regulatory environments fit into transactions and things like that? Okay,
sure, yeah. All, as I said, all materials we're open to. We're not looking to get a lot of hazardous materials into this, but some materials that may have challenges are in the marketplace and do have uses. So there's some reuse opportunities versus a deep well injection or landfill or incineration. So we're working with those companies on those materials, and the way we're helping to connect them with other potential users. And there are several in that category that I can think of that have potential value, but when you use it with groups of companies working together, and also the regulators, in particular the US EPA, is very supportive of this approach and want to help us move toward this circularity idea of avoiding landfill and keeping reuse of the materials. As you go down that path, you'll inevitably move more toward those materials that are easier to reuse rather than the more difficult. But in some cases, that can't happen. You have to use a particular material, and we don't want to. So we're not excluding those. We do, when you actually get into that, it is a due diligence process between the companies that are involved in the transaction. So we in the marketplace, as I mentioned, help and have built into it the various areas that need to be addressed, and different elements of those, whether it's regulatory, legal, technical, perception, geographic, all of those aspects, and logistics is a key component of this as well. We are working with some global logistics companies as another example of this collaborative idea to set up a system, to develop a system where companies that have materials that could be reused but can't afford transportation could be linked up with transportation that would be the empty space on transports, and you could create a secondary market that would be, say, just for example, half the price of the normal, so that you could actually accommodate those kinds of things and make use of the empty space and also move those kinds of materials that aren't that are potentially reusable but aren't viable logistically. But back to the other aspect of this, we do, one restriction we have is we don't allow any materials into the marketplace that carry a confidentiality provision. So in other words, if you had a material and you said it can go in the marketplace, but it has to remain confidential, we would say, no, you can't do that, because we can't assure everybody in the marketplace will commit to that confidentiality requirement. So we're not letting that happen. We would work with a company along those lines and keep it out of the marketplace and try to use our capabilities to help connect with companies that we might see, and in that way kind of be the eyes and ears of that particular type of material.
Great, thank you. So another question is about who the materials marketplace is open to. Do you have to be a member to supply a material? Do you have to be a member to procure a material? And does the scale of the procurement request matter? And I'm happy to answer this, and if you want to jump in with anything additional, but you do need to join the marketplace to participate in either end of the transaction, and the scale of the procurement request does not matter. Whether or not you have to be a member of the Corporate Eco Forum or the WBCSD or the US BCSD, I'm not sure if that was the exact question, but right now our goal is to keep it within our 3 organizations for the most part. A big part of starting this pilot was to leverage the trusted community of companies that have come to sort of know and work with each other through these membership organizations. And there's a great deal of overlap and in both missions and memberships of our organizations. So we do look at membership in the 3 organizations for participation in the marketplace. However, we are considering companies on a case-by-case basis who come from outside of our memberships. And so we're certainly happy to consider those requests on a case-by-case basis. Definitely we are seeing opportunities with sort of small and medium-sized enterprises that could be good, effective players in the marketplace, and things like that. So we don't want to turn someone away for an arbitrary reason just because they're not a member. Our objective with this project is to see if it works, and so we're trying to reduce barriers to entry and don't want to exclude anyone who could be a good partner, but at the same time want to maintain that community of trust that we have so far. Do you want to add anything to that, Andy?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts, and that is the publicity and the attention that the marketplace has gotten and the actual success that we've seen so far has gotten the attention of other organizations that are good. Like one is the Manufacturers Alliance for Productivity and Innovation. Some of you may be a part of. They really like this idea and are inviting us to present it to their members. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is another group that has got a group of companies that are working with it, and they have invited us to present it and are encouraging their members to participate in the marketplace in the U.S. and elsewhere. And then the Electronics Recycling Organization that has been was established recently has expressed it. So there are different industry associations that are coming our way that we're going to go present it to. We want to scale it, and we want to make sure that whoever does get into the marketplace has been reviewed by us, vetted, and we are in the process of creating a kind of a policy of how and what we would do to engage with companies that would like to get in. But I mean, we've also companies have come to us that are more smaller entrepreneurial with solutions that are really interesting, that we would like to get involved as well, and they want to join. So I think we're going to be very diligent about the quality of who is in, and because that is a critical factor. But we're also going to have to be open to creative participation and solution providers. So I think as we go down that path, we'll be working very carefully to make sure that the integrity is intact, and but also that the creative, innovative approach and capabilities are there too.
Great. We have one more question, and then and before we get that, I had one request come in to ask us if we could do a walkthrough of the actual technology platform, and I just wanted to comment quickly that we didn't have enough time to do that during today's presentation. We wanted to get into some of the other details of the project, but we are very happy and often do schedule walkthroughs of the platform with individual companies, and would be happy to do that with anyone. So if you're interested in doing that, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'd be happy to set that up. The last question that I think we'll have time for is related to liability issues on the part of suppliers in the marketplace, and sort of how we manage that. You know, I think Andy kind of mentioned, sort of covered this when he talked about the fact that it's ultimately up to the due diligence of the two players involved in any transaction to ensure that everything is happening within the law and so forth. But Andy, did you want to add anything additional related to potential liability issues that could arise from people supplying materials through the marketplace?
Sure. We think of it as you would be approaching any other supplier to your operation. So you'd work through the logistics and the components of the material and all of the details, and as part of that, liability would be covered as you go down that path and in that kind of exploration and negotiation. We are here to help and can be part of that and or support in any way that kind of exploration. But typically, and we've done that, including legal. We've brought in some legal support to analyze and or technical and or companies that are competitors that aren't used to working together. We work with those as kind of a bridge. All those are there for us, and we can play those roles. But ultimately, the decision when it's to go down to do something with these materials will be after the analysis by the companies that they're satisfied that this will work. Then that's when it usually takes place.
Great. Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I want to thank Andy, John, and Andrea for joining us today and helping share all of the details of this great project. And I want to thank all of our participants for making the time to hear us out. I encourage you to visit our website, materialsmarketplace.org, where you can download a very comprehensive report from our pilot project and more information about how to get involved, including the tiered engagement levels. And of course, feel free to reach out to us at any time to set up a more in-depth conversation with your operations folks to see about how you might roll this out at your own company. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And again, we'll make this recording available in our member center and through all three organizations if you'd like to share it with your colleagues. Thanks, everybody.